Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the latest edition of the Jacob Elyachar Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elyachar, the chief content producer and writer at jakesick.com, a pop culture entertainment news website. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. If you're listening to any of our audio platforms, please give us a 5-star and also download or stream this episode. For the first time in almost 11 years, I have a guest with my same name. He is the host of the Damaged Good podcast and the author of the books Quicksand and The Waiting Room. So please help me welcome Jake the Snake Fraczek to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jake. And I got to say, your parents have terrific taste in names. Good name.
Same as yours. Same with yours. It's a wonderful name.
Yeah. This is great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, by the way.
You're so welcome. It's an honor to have another Jake's Take who has a great take on a podcast. And this is the first, this is our multiversal madness, if you know what I mean.
We should go on tour. I like this.
All right, so let's get started, my friend. So when did you get interested in the entertainment industry? And how did that passion evolve into the desire to pursue a career in media?
I think all entertainment at first is like art. And, I was painting and drawing and skateboarding, and there was music and writing and poetry and then broadcasting way down the line. And it's all art. But when you want to make money off of it or make a living off of it, that's kind of when it becomes entertainment, because now I'm sharing my music, my books, my podcast with you to entertain you and what have you. So I guess I only got into the entertainment industry because I wanted to make a living off of being creative. And then it snowballed from there. And then, when you make, I think the first thing I made money off of or a career off of was music. And then broadcasting, having a radio show, and now as a writer. So that's kind of how I slipped into it. I don't think I planned on it when I was a little boy, but.
I think, well, for me, I've always wanted to be in the industry. Like, I originally wanted to be behind the camera at first. Yeah. Like, definitely as a cameraman on a talk show. And I was watching, however, as I watched Regis and Rosie and those people, and then Letterman, those three people, I think, kind of molded my style.
Oh, nice. I watched a lot of the daytime talk shows when I was young. I'd skip school or stay home from school, and those would always be on TV. I'd watch those, and then I'd go out skateboarding around 11 in the morning.
I love those daytime talk shows. Like, for me, it's like no one can be another. There's not going to be another Regis Philbin. They don't make them like Regis Philbin. They don't make them like Rosie O'Donnell, and they don't make them like Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah, definitely not.
Awesome. So I know that you spoke about music, so I want to give a quick, I want to give my audience a quick origin story of the Blue Gold. So how did that band form?
I'm from Boston, but I was living in New York at the time, and was doing music as a solo artist, and I met this other kid, my man Franco Anthony from New York, real talented kid, one of the most talented dudes I've ever worked with in music. And we had been collaborating for a little while, and then I had an idea. I wanted to start a band, but I had a very kind of specific sound in mind, and I needed someone who shared the same creative ideas as me and also was really good. So I stepped to my man Franco, and I was like, look, I got this idea for a band. It's going to be a little different. It's going to be a little hard to dial it in with the other people we get into it, but I think you'll understand it. He was really into it. So we started this band, Blue Gold, and we found the rest of he was a drummer and writer, do vocals, and I was writing and vocals. So we needed to find the rest of the band, and it took a little while. We got a great guitarist, my man Mike Barron. We had various bass players and different backup singers. And when we found our sound, we just really had a good time. Live, the performance energy live was great. But in the studio, it was like when I was a kid painting and drawing. I just like the creative aspect of it. Kind of like when I write books now alone, we would make a lot of really great music in there and spend a lot of time. And got to travel, tour, play live music everywhere. It was fun. And that's really where my writing for my books would start to kind of, I was pouring a lot of emotional stuff into those songs and that music, that band, that album. And a lot of that would help translate into my books line.
That's pretty cool, Will. I've done the New York lifestyle before. I lived in New York for 4 years in East 39th and 2nd Avenue.
Oh, nice. I was in Crown Heights in Brooklyn and a little bit in like Nolita area near Soho.
I love that city very much. So what does that, but however, the thing is, it's so different and competitive in media versus Los Angeles. So what were some of the challenges that you faced breaking into the entertainment industry on both coasts, and how have you overcome those obstacles?
Starting off in Boston, where I was from, it's a little smaller of a city. It's not a hub of entertainment industry. I mean, there's little music scenes and writing and publications, but that's you kind of start where you're from. And so I got my feet wet there, but it's a good place to get your feet wet because it's not like a little town. And then also from there, I was already traveling doing music, and I'd already been in New York and played and been to LA before, but I knew there was like almost like a glass ceiling at the time. And so I went to New York, just more opportunities. It was close, 4 hours away. Um, and I could still be close to family if I needed to, but I had more resources there. I was building more resources, the music, and even resources that I use now in my writing career. Um, and as a Boston dude in New York, there's obviously a little silly backlash over like sports stuff. And I get it. I might have been participatory in that as a kid, but I mean, I don't care about that now. I'm here to make art, and anybody who was really serious could see that. So I just had to work really hard, show them I was serious. Um, and then I came to LA. It was a little different because I was trying to do different stuff. And people say coming from the East Coast, sometimes you carry maybe a bit of aggressive assertiveness or whatever. And sometimes that works in my favor out here, and sometimes it hasn't. So trying to like mellow myself out with it, but still be myself. I'm a lot more free and relaxed than I used to be, and it carries over to my creative, my careers. So I think I'm having an easier time as an author and stuff, and using my resources in LA. The music scene in the East Coast, I was fighting. I was working real hard. Like maybe I'm lazy now. I don't know, but I felt like I had to work a lot harder out there in the East Coast.
I gotta say, there's a different judgmentality when it comes to New York and Los Angeles. As someone that has lived in New York for 4 years, it's like you have to say it's like they're honest and brutal, and not to mention very quick. Your attention
Yeah,
span is not as good. Los Angeles, on the other hand, I do not want to be lied to in front of my face while you're looking to have a stab, and like you're all sweet and everything, but you also have a knife behind your back. And
yeah,
not to mention, I do not want to stand in wait in like literally 45 minutes of traffic on the 405.
pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal. You got to find a good history podcast or something to pass the time because it's a lot of traffic.
Absolutely. So let's talk about while we're on the subject, let's talk about podcasts because you brought that way into. So
Yeah.
I would love to talk to you about the transition from radio to podcast. So what were some of the similarities and differences? Because I don't do I wasn't radio. I just brought into writing and then coming into podcasting. So what were some of the similarities and differences that you brought from your radio career into the podcasting world?
Um, when I first started dabbling with radio, it was like in high school, like a little college radio, and that's playing music and just getting to talk in between. And it was, I was playing the music I wanted to, and it was fun, but not a lot of talking. And it was FM radio stuff, so there's a limitation on what you can say. And something I learned about anything I do creatively, any of my art, I'm tapping into my strengths when I can be not explicit to be explicit. I'm not a shock jock. I don't like that, but not limiting what I can create. And um, I got on Dash Radio. I don't know if I can say another radio station on here. Dash Radio. If I have to edit that out, they're the biggest digital radio in the world. So like satellite radio, but if you drive under a tunnel, it won't go out. And just like XM radio or satellite radio, there was no censorship. So I was still doing the music and interviewing guests and talking, but I could just totally be myself. I didn't have to do any ads for anybody. And then, like podcasting, you can be yourself. You're in control. You know how it is. And I like that autonomy. And I'm a storyteller. That's what I do in my writing, my books. That's what I did in music. And on radio, you're interviewing, you're talking about a topic, or you're talking about the songs you're playing. A podcast, I could be telling stories, or I could be talking to guests who are like, who are going to share a story that's going to reflect something else I want to share. So I felt like it was a little more in my wheelhouse, again, tapping into more of my strengths, and there was no limitations. And radio is live, usually, whereas the podcast, it's not. I don't do mine live. It's a little more relaxed. If I'm messing up, maybe I can cut it and edit it. So It's like writing. I can spell check my book. I can go back and change a sentence if I need to.
Absolutely. For me, it's basically, I am more comfortable with having guests to talk with, because the thing is, I only do one solo podcast a year, and it's basically the end of the year wrap up. But however, I was listening to Damaged Goods, and you are very good when it's a solo. So you're so welcome. So what's the difference between, is there a dynamic and energy between having a solo podcast versus having, a guest on?
I think, first off, Jacob, I want to say thank you. That was a really nice, warm and compliment, because I don't know if I feel like I'm better when I have a guest to talk to. But I just recorded a solo episode yesterday, and when I do those, I think I'm tapping, more into my radio experience. You're talking out there to these, listeners, are out there, but you can't see them. And there's you're engineers in the studio, but you're not talking. And the podcast with a guest, I get interested about stuff. I've always got something I'm going to learn from you, even just talking with you on here, whoever it is. And then I'm always, like any artist, I have an ego and I want to talk about myself. And so it's more fun to talk about yourself to somebody else. But doing the solo episodes, I have to have a little more of a concise focus and a topic, where if, say I had you on my podcast, I'd be asking you questions and you'd be sharing stuff that would spark another question or comment. When I do it on my own, I got to have a little itinerary, and I'm kind of ragtag with it. I'll have like a piece of paper with a couple bullet points written, and it looks like hieroglyphics because my handwriting is trash. But I'll just see it and it'll spark what I want to say, and then I can kind of go about it so it still sounds natural, not too scripted, because I don't like the scripted feel.
We're talking two different things, and this is what I like, because the thing is, for me, I need to have some talking points and also some ideas when I'm solo, but also some script as well, like writing out broadcast style.
Yeah, that's true. And on the radio tip, I definitely did that, so I had a little experience with it. And I just think, again, like you realize as you get older and more experience in whatever you're doing as art, what works, what you do best, and what you don't. And so I'm trying to see what I'm doing good, and that's what I kind of have to lean into.
Awesome. So let's talk Damaged Goods. So how does the Damaged Goods podcast stand out in our medium, in the podcasting
world? There's, it's people have told me this too. Like there's niche podcasts where, we're talking about pro wrestling, or we're talking about organized mafia figures, or skateboarding. Maybe those are the kind of podcasts I listen to. But I like the idea of having general guests, but I don't want to just have people like, I'm not really interested in cars. I'm not really into outer space. So I don't want to have that. I'm interested in the arts. Are you an actor, a director, a writer, a broadcaster, a podcaster, stand-up comedian, a chef, a DJ? That's the stuff I love. That's the stuff I'm interested in. So it's not a super niche podcast, but it's just conversation with artists. There's not going to be the CEO of a big corporation. There's not a bricklayer in here. It's going to be someone who's creative or works in some creative realm. And that way, we've got a little in common, but we're going to be different enough where the conversations are interesting. And I don't really do the interview style like I've done on radio. I want the conversation to reveal things about the person, and also what it's like in that artistic field they work in. So, if you were on my show, my podcast, I'd be talking to you and you'd be telling me things about Jacob's life, but also about what it's like to be a podcaster. And then, people listening might learn about what it is the podcast thing is like, as well as what you're like personally, And then you could share some of the trials, tribulations, the rough parts you might have had in your personal life that have somehow translated into what you do creatively. That's the damaged part,
Absolutely. And you've had some really good guests. And I've noticed that some of the guests, you've actually had some people that I never thought would be great guests. But for example, I remember on some of your episodes, you had people that worked merchandise during music tours.
Yeah. I was a roadie, for lack of a better word, for 5 years. And then Brickham's a pretty big artist. I got to travel the world, and a very integral role on any live music tour, don't matter the genre, is the merchandise thing. That's where they're making a lot of money. The bands are. It's a different look. They're looking at the live music and artists from a different perspective. So, if anyone's got some good stories, and I got a sense that maybe they're at least decent at conversation, they might be a great candidate for being a guest on my podcast.
That's wonderful because the thing is, sometimes you have those behind the scenes takes that you don't often have. Like I remember listening when Desmond Child came on the show, and he was talking about all those behind the scenes stuff about all of the songs. Like I still remember his story about Dude Looks Like a Lady, or when Kiss, or Joan Jett, or The Connection, or how he has 6 degrees of Darlene Love with his stuff. And then also, I just had Jane Velez Mitchell on, who is a legend, who's an Emmy-winning journalist, and then who started Unchained TV, which actually helps talk about like animal rights and climate change and all that stuff. So it's very interesting how these conversations happen.
Yeah, and you learn a lot, if you can shut your mouth and open your ears more. So that's what I try to do on my podcast because I talk too much. So when I got somebody on, it's nice because they're going to probably, I hope, shed a little light on something I don't know and maybe give me a different perspective on things. And I got people on that we end up agreeing on things, and it's interesting if we don't, not that it's like a argument or a debate, but, and then maybe I'll think about it later, or maybe they will, and our perspectives can grow. That's always a nice byproduct of the conversation.
Absolutely, because the thing is, you got to have that conversation. You got to have great chemistry. And sometimes it works and sometimes it isn't. Today, I'm happy to say this chemistry is working.
This is. I'm quite enjoying it. I feel a good, comfortable energy on here. I think it's
awesome.
Nice, dude. When my publicist hit me up with this, I saw Jake's takes. I was like, yeah, let's do this. I wanted to do it.
Well, I'm thrilled that you chose my platform.
No, you chose me as a guest. I'm honored.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy. So so have you had some, because I mentioned those two, Desmond Child and Jane Velez Mitchell, as memorable conversations, and plus with Howie Mandel earlier this year, and also Jay Starrett and then Joss Minnie from The Challenge and Survivor. Have you had those memorable conversations, like those memorable guests? If so, can you share some of those conversations with my audience?
Yeah, I've had, I've had some big name guests on, and then some guests that some people probably don't know. And it wasn't the guests always that would be so memorable and powerful, but what was the conversation? I had this woman who's it was a pretty big episode, and she's got a pretty big following. She that's what do you call it? Like an all natural beauty products line, is really into health and wellness, and does that on social media, what have you. And she shared a pretty heavy story about a Me Too incident at the height of that in LA with the Kabbalah Center in LA is like a pretty big church organization, and the head rabbi at that was getting, a lot of lawsuits on him, and she was in the middle of one. She had some pretty crazy stories, and she won it or whatever, but she got to share this really heavy story, and it was, I didn't see that coming, and it took a lot for her to share it, so I was real grateful about that. I didn't even ask for it. I didn't, and it was like a pretty serious story. I had a drummer from a band on. It was a very successful indie band. They've been around for a while. And the lead singer, his friend passed away, and he talked about how it really hurt his love for not just music professionally, but he stopped, put his drums in another room. He didn't touch music for a couple of years, and then going to some ayahuasca ceremonies, he started healing and getting back into just the love of it for fun, not even trying to go back out to professionally. But it touched me because when I transitioned from music into what I was doing now, I had a little bit of a pain like that myself, maybe not to the degree he did, but that one really hit me personally, So sometimes I'm just moved, and then sometimes people like listeners or fans will just be like, oh, I love this episode. That was such a unique one. And then sometimes it's just if we're laughing a lot. Like I had a friend of mine on. She's also a very famous bass player in different bands traveling the world. She's just fucking funny, pardon my French. And we just laughed the whole time, and it was really entertaining. So I like those ones too.
I love guests like that can open up and to share stories and everything. But also, you can also enjoy yourself and laugh.
Yeah, I like laughing. It's probably my most favorite thing to do.
All righty, so I know we got to get to some serious stuff because you've written
serious. Cut to the core.
All righty, so you've written 2 books, Quicksand and The Waiting Room. They're both autobiographical. But were these writing processes similar or different?
First one was about 5 years. I didn't plan on it being a book at first. I was going through crazy stuff, a lot of life changes and hectic things all at once. It was like a perfect storm of stuff to throw your world upside down. And I was already, writing music and poems, but I started writing these little pieces and stuff to kind of process all the stuff I was going on. But I wrote them like stories. And then I started seeing a connection to it. And this was going to be the waiting room. So I just started perfecting it, but I wasn't working at it at a very fast pace at first because I didn't really think I was going to make a book. But then I saw I had so much, and I shared a couple with people, and I got really good response. And I was like, this feels natural. So then I made it a book, and it was written through a lot of painful times. And I was living a little wild and just trying to cope with it day to day. And writing was one of the ways, but I was also using a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. But I used my dark, humorous lens to write all these stories. So even when it's sad, it's kind of funny, or if it's kind of funny, it's kind of dark. But then the next book, I wrote it like in 11 months. I was going to write more. I didn't really know I was going to write. And my father, who I had an interesting relationship with, he got diagnosed with a real bad stage 4 liver cancer. And I went to Mexico. I dropped everything to go take care of him because I wanted to, because I loved him, but also some ego thing too, And it was a really crazy experience doing it all alone. And it gave me, this sounds kind of twisted, but it essentially gave me inspiration for this new book. This was my new sad, crazy time like that I had 5 years ago. So I applied the same method. It was funny moments, dark and sad moments, and I was writing it quicker, probably because it felt more intense and it was just impulsive survival to be writing. So that one came fast, and it's a longer book.
Sorry about that. It's very first of all, it's very tough when you see someone that you have a family member deal with that kind of personal trauma. And do that, and also with ego too, because the thing is, I look up to a lot of amazing role models in media, but however, if I list them all, like I don't know, Simon Cowell, Howard Stern, Christina Aguilera, Elton John, Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen, they all have something in common, is they're very well known in our industry for having big egos.
Yeah. I think there's something about anybody, if you're going to try to be successful, not even just in the entertainment industry, but big business, whatever, the ego is something that kind of helps drive that. I mean, we all have it. It's how much we let it get a hold of us. And I try to use my ego to my advantage sometimes. I mean, I probably wouldn't be writing books and having, podcasts and stuff if I didn't have a bit of an ego that's big. I just try to keep it in check. Mine's a lot smaller than it was years ago. Maybe that's hindered my ambition a bit, but I feel healthier. But I love Elton John, dude. I got pictures of me sitting on Elton John's lap. Short story, Jake the Snake, fun fact. I grew up in the West Indies in the Caribbean. Before I moved to America, my father owned a nightclub. All these famous musicians would party, and Elton John came and partied. I got pictures of him, me sitting on his lap. I'll email it to you afterwards.
Elton is probably one of my all-time favorite artists.
Man.
My jaw just dropped. I paid at least a king's ransom to see him at 2018 at the Madison Square Garden for one of his farewell tours.
Nice.
I am just so glad I got to see him live because his music means the world to me.
Yeah. You got to see your favorites before they go, because I waited around and some of these great artists, then the next month, gosh, something terrible happens and they're gone. So you did the right thing, Good to go. It's fun to see those people that you really love.
Absolutely. It's amazing because if I had a time machine, I would go back to Michael Jackson Bad Tour, or to see Freddie Mercury, or to see Whitney Houston.
Oh, Whitney Houston's I love Whitney. I got a bunch of Whitney records over there on the shelf.
I gotta say, I Didn't Know My Own Strength, her last record. It was beautiful. Still record. Diana Warren wrote the hell out of that song.
Yeah, hell yeah. You should go, you gotta go see all your favorites, man. Make a list of who you love that's still alive. And if they're touring, go pay for those tickets. You won't be disappointed.
Thanks, Jake. I really appreciate it. So let's talk about your second book, The Quicksand, because I don't think have we talked about Quicksand?
No, Quicksand is the first one. The Waiting Room is the second one. No, we didn't really. That's the one where I went to care for my father. But we could talk about it. I didn't really get too in detail. But yeah.
All right. So let's talk about writing processes, because the thing is, as you explained to me with The Waiting Room is different, and Quicksand, they're both Like, how do you sit down and write a book? Because the thing is with me, when it comes to like, if it's something that I really enjoy, like recapping America's Got Talent or reviewing new music, it takes me, have the fine tune. I can sit down and once say that like music reviews, it's going to take me a couple hours because there's so much to choose from.
Like ideas come to me, and if I'm out and about, I whip out my phone and the notes and I start writing. If it's concrete sentences or just ideas, I'll think about stories things that happen in my life are just kind of wild. I find myself getting into interesting situations or just some other situations. If you have a unique eye on it, you might find some humorous, weird element to it that the other person didn't see. But I always make note of these things or I put them down on my computer. And then, there's like a lot of writers, stick by this rule of you write every day. You just get up and write every day. And they're right. That's correct. But the method to my madness just is different. I don't write every day, but sometimes I write for like 10, 12 hours, I used to do a lot of night writing, which I still do. I like waking up really early and writing. If the sun's not up, I don't write much in the middle of the day. I'll start in the afternoon, but I have some like jazz on in the background, no lyrics, no syncopated beats. I like to obviously be alone. And you don't want to be too distracted. I don't like to, and I might drink some wine usually or whatever, and I'll write a little while, step out of the house, maybe I'll take a walk, go to the bar, go get a taco, come back. But I don't like to force it because sometimes it comes like a possession. That's why I gotta write this, or I'll be on a flight and I'll just whip out and write like 3 pages on my phone out of nowhere, like a story just will come and ways to articulate it. But sometimes I just don't want to write for a few days. Some people say you got to write every day. I mean, Stephen King does, but I mean, I don't know. I like to write a little more poetically. I'm not just like a novelist, so it's got to mean something to me where it's coming from.
I've got to say, my writing stuff, like, I think I need to have a coffee shop be in this round. Like, I don't really like solo, but for me, coffee shop. I love my coffee shops.
Can't do it, man. I could do like emails. I could maybe edit in there. But to your point, I would go to bars, like not popular, loud bars. I would go to a bar and I'd sit in the corner, and I would like have headphones on with jazz, and I would write there. That was like my coffee shop, and I'd be drinking whatever I was drinking. Not to talk with anyone. I didn't want loud music and sports TVs. But the coffee shop, I felt everyone's on the computer there, but I felt like everyone was looking at me weird. Whereas at the bar, I'm the only guy with a laptop and headphones in writing, but nobody looked at me. So I felt more anonymous,
I know what you mean. So do you have a list of your dream guests? Because I have a list that's like almost 2 pages.
Somebody asked me that a while ago, and I was having a hard time because there's certain people I really, really admire, but I don't know if I want to talk to like some big guy. But then there's certain people I think that would be pretty interesting that aren't maybe on the scale of super success. They're not the Beyonce level, and I don't know why I'm more interested to have a conversation with them. Are we talking about alive or dead though? That's a big, you talking about alive?
Alive, of course. Like if there was believe me, if I like it for the afterlife, there's a lot of people I want to talk to.
Yeah, that's a big list. Alive, like there'd be some pro skate. I was a big skateboarder when I was a kid. There's some pro skateboarders and surfers I'd talk to. God, man, a lot of the writers I like are dead. There's like 1 or 2 writers alive I really like. One of them I don't know. You know what? Werner Herzog, the German director, he a great documentarian director. I'd like to interview Werner Herzog. Steve McQueen, who's not the old actor Steve McQueen, he's the British director Steve McQueen, younger black dude. I'd love to interview or just talk with those guys. Man, now this is a tough one. I would be screwed if you put a gun to my head about this.
Well, first of all, I'm never going to do that because I'm against violence at all costs.
I appreciate that.
That's number 1. Number 2, I gotta say, yeah, a lot of my favorite people are dead, but like I did have a legendary encounter with the one and only Stan Lee.
Oh, okay. That would have been a great one. I would have loved that. Tell me.
So let me just tell you my quick Stan Lee story. So Stan Lee came to Planet Comic Con, which is basically Kansas City's largest comic book convention in the Midwest. And I paid a king's ransom, but it's Stan freaking Lee. You gotta pay them ransom.
Yeah.
It was like 2016, and it was one of his final appearances. So I told him how much he inspired me as a writer, and I do have a photo I could show you. But I gotta look in my phone for it, but not now.
My first pet ever, I didn't really have a lot of pets, was a hamster. And I named him Stan Lee, but not Stanley like Stan Lee, like Marvel Comics Stan Lee. I was a big comic book head. And what I liked about Marvel Comics more than anything else is Stan Lee's characters he developed weren't always your clear-cut good guys and bad guys. They were flawed characters. You kind of like Magneto and some of these guys that were villains. And then even the Incredible Hulk and these people, they were troubled people. They weren't like your Supermans where it's all perfect. And I like that. Even at a young age, I identified with that. And that's what I write about and stuff, or, is flawed characters,
Awesome. So let's talk about social media. So what are your favorite platforms that you like to interact with your fans on?
Instagram's my favorite because it works kind of the way I like to be humorous on social media, humorous or poetic. I'm either posting about my books and my podcast, or writing little poetic ramblings, or I'm kind of just being silly, wacky, zany, just cracking jokes. So social media, like different ones I can use for different things. Instagram is my favorite because I can post a picture of something on my travels and write little poetic rambling, and then I can just post hilarious shit I see or videos, and I can be short and quick with it. That'd be my favorite. Twitter I use, but a lot of people are arguing on Twitter. And on Facebook, it's like my mother's friends are on there and my aunts and uncles, and so that's conflicting. They took my Facebook account away right now anyway, so I can't use it.
What?
I don't know. I violated community standards. I only post the same things I post everywhere. It's just memes, and here's my book, here's my podcast. I don't really put my personal feelings on there, so I don't know what I posted. But I got 30 days. Allegedly, I'll be back.
I have fingers crossed before this podcast gets up. You better be back there.
I hope so. But I have my Twitter, my TikTok, and my Instagram, and I don't really like TikTok. I'm 40 years old. But I can make some funny music video things for the memes. Not me in the camera being funny. That's not it. But I do use it to my advantage in my style.
I cannot do TikTok for the life of me because the thing is I have way too much going on.
Yeah, you're a busy man. You got, we have a lot going on, and adding another one on the list, especially when it's kind of time consuming, I can't do it. It's tough.
Absolutely. If I ever had a social media intern, oh my God, they would have to master TikTok, and that'd be great.
I know. I need some 20-year-old kid who knows that stuff like the back of his hand, because it's a learning curve for me.
Awesome. So we got to start wrapping up. So if you had the opportunity to meet with someone who is like, okay, I would love to try out podcasting, what advice would you share with them?
Record yourself talking, either with somebody or by yourself. Play it for some people, then play it for yourself. A lot of people haven't heard their voice. And doing music for years, and even radio, and as a kid, I knew what I sounded like. And when you know what you sound like, you can get comfortable. You can find your voice, as they say. There's a lot of people podcast, and it's, you might have a great idea or a great topic, but are you engaging? Am I going to pay attention? And it's not even just that, but that's the style that you put on. The way you host your show is the style you kind of put on, like the painter paints a thing, or the way a person plays the guitar. So if they're just, reading historical facts on a podcast because they're interested in the Revolutionary War, that's cool. But how you say it is even more important than what you're saying. So try to develop your voice, find your essence, your own style first.
Awesome. Okay, Jake, last question. Are you ready?
Do it. Shoot. Let's go.
Where can I buy your book or books? Where can I listen to your podcast? And where can I find Blue Gold's music?
The books, The Waiting Room and Quicksand are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, even Walmart, select bookstores. The audiobook for Quicksand's out. The audiobook for The Waiting Room is coming out real soon, and they're both narrated by me. You get to hear this lovely voice. Podcast, Damaged Goods Podcast. You can go to damagedgoodspodcast.com, or it's on every major platform that you stream podcasts on. Social media, it's at Jake Fraczek, JakeFraczek, Damaged Goods Podcast. Also, Blue Gold stuff, some of it's still on Spotify, some's on TuneCore, depending on who owns it. YouTube, there's videos for Blue Gold stuff. Also, what's that other one the kids like? SoundCloud. So yeah. But there's Blue Gold videos on YouTube.
Awesome. So guys, if you missed an episode of the Jake Sick with Jacob Elyachar Podcast, visit our channels on Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Spotify, and Spreaker. Jake Sick with Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Are you on social media? Because I'm on social media too. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Jake-Shake.com, the blog and starting all, is celebrating 11 years this year. So I am very excited. If you want to see more articles, interviews, reviews, find out what my take on America's Got Talent is, or if you want to find out what I would think of the new albums, head to Jake-Shake.com. Jake, it was an honor and privilege to speak with you.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Until next time, everybody, have a great one. Goodbye.